I can't seem to keep up with my own schedule today.
Just kind of count.
All right, we have a handout.
1, 2,
You got
3,
to talk.
No handout.
4, 5.
You're gonna
Hello?
Yeah, you're gonna have to. No, you don't have to lean. You just need to talk louder.
Okay. Well, I was
Okay,
trying
great.
not to.
Call the meeting to order. Again, I apologize for being late. The first thing I want to do is recognize Lucy and Katie. This is their first meeting, and you're old hands at this stuff, so thank you both for agreeing to participate again.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you. Okay, so this is the special call work session for January 15th at 5:30. Basically, we're here to hear from WLA on the work they've done so far and what we've got coming up. So I think we could just turn it over to you guys, and you guys can walk us through your presentation.
Hello, thank you all so much for having us. I'm sorry it is the coldest day of the year, but I appreciate everyone coming out. I know it's a tough day to get outside. My name is Anders. I'm with WLA Studio. I'm a historic preservation specialist. We are a multidisciplinary firm out of Athens, Georgia. We have planners, preservationists, and landscape architects. I specialize in historic resource surveys. We also do other preservation planning and historic landscape management and cultural resource management projects. So they have a wide variety of skills. So today, what I want to do is just kind of talk to y'all about what a historic resource survey is and how we go about that and what our survey methodology is. And then I'm going to talk to y'all about the history of Aiken. So I'm going to be preaching to the choir about the history of Aiken. I'm sure that there are things that y'all know that I don't know, and I'm sure I've got some gaps. And so a part of this process is coming to y'all and meeting and seeing, what needs additional research and things like that, and pointing me to resources and things. So I don't know everything about Aiken yet, so bear with me if I miss some stuff. Okay. So what is a historic resources survey? It is a systematic process of identifying, researching, and documenting historic properties that reflect important historical themes in a place's development. So that can be things like architectural trends or planning trends or population influxes related to industry or commercial activity, the types of trends that impact the physical development of a place. So what we're trying to do is document the physical resources and tie them back to those historic themes. On the left here is a 1918 Sanborn map. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Sanborn maps, but they were drawn up for cities throughout the country as an insurance protocol for fire risk. And these are really helpful documents for us. They help us sort of trace change over time, how the downtown has changed over time, what types of building materials were common. For example, in earlier Sanborn maps in this area, you see more wood frame buildings, but by 1918, they're more brick frame, or brick bearing. So it kind of helps you trace developmental history over time. So what kinds of things do we survey? We survey buildings, structures, objects, cultural landscapes, and natural features. So it's a wide variety of stuff. We survey residential buildings, commercial buildings, institutional buildings, religious buildings, educational buildings, and any sort of natural landscape or designed landscape. So that might include historic gardens or cemeteries, those types of things. To talk a little bit about the age of things that we survey everything that's 40 years or older. The threshold for something to be considered historic is 50 years, but we survey to 40 years so that the survey remains valid for 10 years. And we do survey everything regardless of its integrity. So even if there's been extensive material changes on a building, we still survey it and try to document those changes as best we can. So some of the benefits of a historic resources survey, one, they're necessary to maintain CLG status, which is really important for municipalities. It opens up a lot of different funding opportunities through the federal government. It's also just important for community planning decisions, zoning decisions. It can also be used to promote cultural tourism, or in the case of Aiken, y'all have done a great job with historic designations. So in other cities we've surveyed, they don't have any historic districts. So these surveys are really instrumental in helping people understand what areas are historic, what areas have integrity, and what areas are significant for potential listing or designation at the local level. Again, some other benefits is it's really just a easy way to access the information. So we really want to present this information in a way that's digestible and easy to navigate, not only for city staff, but also just for the general community. You know, if someone is interested in their own property and they want to know more about it, this is a good way to do that. You can tell them what kind of house type it is, what type of architectural style it might have, or, you know, what are the character defining features of your own home. So that's the kind of thing, that's the kind of information we're trying to put out there for people. One question we get a lot is, do surveyed resources automatically become designated? The answer is no. So that's a much longer, more intensive process. This is more of a preliminary step in documenting a wide variety of resources. For a designation to change, that would have to be coordinated with the city, state, and federal levels, depending on the level of listing. So this will not change any designation. So no one needs to worry about things getting listed or delisted. That's not part of the project.
I got my mic turned off. I don't want to interrupt your
Oh, no, go
presentation,
ahead.
but I do have a question or a statement about that. So, you know, it is the city's intent to go that next step and to try to get some designations. And
Right.
so I think what you're doing helps to give us the documentation to do
Yes.
that, especially on the ones where we have non-designated properties. We want to make sure we get the non-designated, but that is a city council action.
Okay.
And we understand that's not what you're doing. We have to take your data and move it to the next step. But
We're here to
we
make
have-
that easier for
that's
y'all,
right. And-
ideally.
But we've had a lot of trouble where people would bring a house and say, well, we want to do a fence or a shed or a whatever. And we have no designation, which means we have no way, according to our ordinance, to rule. And we want to try to stop up those gaps as to
Gotcha.
best possible. But like I said, that's on us, not on you.
Yeah,
Well, I'm happy to help.
yeah, just one other question too, because I bet somebody else is thinking that. When you do your listing, are you gonna list what kind of designation they contain right now?
Yes, that will be documented.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah,
I was
so
hoping that would be your answer.
Yes, yeah. Anything that is currently listed, whether it's part of a historic district or individually listed, will be recorded.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just for the record, when y'all finish your presentation, I will invite the public to make comments. So if there's something you want to talk about, make a note and we'll get a chance for you guys to ask at the end, okay?
I have one more question too. When you say all properties over 40 years old, that's in the whole city?
Within
Or is
our
it in-
survey area,
Okay.
which I have on a slide, so
Okay.
we'll get there. So this is our standard documentation. It's usually a minimum of 2 to 3 photographs. We try to do left oblique, right oblique, and front facade as topography and vegetation allow. If there are outstanding architectural details or landscape features, we will also document those. In Aiken, there's a particular set of challenges with the fences, which are beautiful. So we have talked about potentially using drones as a way to take pictures of photos from the public right-of-way. We do not go on private property. We stay on the public right-of-way. So we're documenting the things that we can see from the public right-of-way, and in some cases, that's not much. So we have a drone guy who we will probably call up at some point to help us with the properties we can't see from the public right-of-way. I also want to note that we do go out of our way to document outbuildings as best we can. So whether that be a historic garage or shed near a building, or in Aiken's case, that might be a stable or a barn. So we do go out of our way to document historic outbuildings because they are also important. This is just sort of a breakdown of what we're looking at when we survey a building. So this is an example from Monroe, Georgia. This is a Queen Anne cottage built around 1900. So if I was looking at this building and surveying it, things that I would note are essentially what features are original that are still extant and what things have been changed. So in this example, you know, it's got a large rectangular vent in the front-facing gable. It's got decorative porch brackets. There's a transom light and decorative trim around the front door. It's got its original windows and window trim. Some changes to note. It's a residential building that's been converted to a commercial use. There's been some brick screen infill between brick pure foundations. So that's just kind of what we're looking for, what things are original and what things have been changed. This is another example from Monroe. This is a two-door saddlebag. These are often built as workforce housing, so you see them a lot around cotton mills or train stations. So in this example, this was built near a cotton mill. It was built around 1910. And some things that are still intact are, it's still got its central brick chimney. A lot of the times as houses are renovated, they lose their central chimney and one of the doors is enclosed. So it no longer has two front doors. You see that a lot with saddlebags. In this case, it still has both of its original front doors, which are 5-panel Craftsman era doors. It also has its original windows. But some changes that have been made. So it's got replacement vinyl siding. It has replacement porch supports. And so when I'm looking at that, I think vinyl siding, and it's got these very specific metal mid-century porch supports. So in my mind, this building probably underwent some changes in the 60s or 70s, around the mid-century. So those are the kind of observations we're trying to make as we look at each house. Okay, just to kind of give y'all an overview of what to expect in the final deliverable with the Historic Resources Survey report. So the first couple chapters are just like nuts and bolts, executive summaries and project descriptions. And then we get into the more detailed bit, which is a summary of previous preservation activity, which in some places is a very short section, but in Aiken will be a much larger section, where we kind of highlight what preservation activity has already happened in a place. And then we go into our developmental history, and that's where we really kind of break down those historic themes that we have identified that impacted the development of Aiken. And then we talk about our survey methodology, and then we break down the survey results, and we provide an architectural analysis. So essentially, you know, where are you seeing pockets of Victorian era architecture? Where are you seeing pockets of mid-century infill? Where are you seeing pockets of smaller workforce housing? Things like that. So we try to provide a pretty detailed and thoughtful analysis of the architecture in a place. And then we have recommendations for future preservation activity, which I hope to work with the city on, so we are addressing your needs. And then we have our appendix items, which are our survey maps and our survey data, which is in a spreadsheet format. So this is just, this is a table of contents, not very exciting, but this is from Sumter, South Carolina, and this is just to kind of show you what this will look like for Aiken. So now, this is our survey area. So we are going to photograph every single building within this area, whether or not it's 40 years old or older. It's also important for us to have examples of infill. What kind of later architecture are you seeing in historic areas? So we will only survey those buildings that are 40 years or older, but we will photograph everything. And that's just our standard practice. So this area includes the historic Aiken and Old Aiken overlay districts, as well as the Winter Colony historic districts. And just to show y'all kind of what already exists at the state level, this is the public-facing map from the South Carolina Department of Archives and History. So this map has identified existing districts and resources that are listed, as well as areas and resources that are potentially eligible that could be listed, pending further research and documentation. And our goal is essentially to build upon this data, update older surveys, and really create, it's important for surveys to be able to kind of build upon each other, and that's our goal. Okay, so here's where I get to the part where I'm gonna be telling everyone from Aiken about Aiken. So just bear with me as I go through it. So as far as I understand it, this area was very sparsely settled before the 1830s. So during the colonial and post-revolutionary era, there were a couple failed settlements on the opposite of Augusta. On the other side of the Savannah River, you had Savannah Town, Fort Moore, New Windsor Township, Hamburg, a couple different settlements that started and then varied in their successes. But most of the activity and economy in this area was around trade with Native American groups, so the Westo, the Savannah, and then later the Creek and the Cherokee. But aside from the few farmers and traders, this area was very sparsely populated and essentially the frontier at that time. But during the 1830s, the South Carolina Canal and Railroad Company decided they want to create an inland track that ran from Charleston to Hamburg. And so they hired two engineers, Andrew A. Dexter and Cyril Pascalis, to design the rail line. And as legend has it, Andrew Dexter was in the process of courting Sarah Williams, who was the daughter of William Williams, who was one of the investors in the company and also owned a plantation called Chinaberry. And one of the conditions of their marriage was that he route the railroad through William Williams' plantation. And so they did, and they got married. So as they platted the railroad, they were also instructed to plat a town, which they named for William Aiken, one of the founders of the company, who died before the railroad was finished. This is not the original map. As far as I can tell, the original Dexter and Pascalis map has been lost or is in private holdings. I haven't been able to find a copy of it online. But this is just to kind of give you a representative example of what an early plat map would have looked like, and the grid plan that they established, which is still very well intact in Aiken. On the bottom left here is the railroad cut, which was added in the 1850s using the labor of enslaved people. And the cut was added because Aiken's elevation was actually a little high, and they had to rely on a steam engine to pull the train up the tracks through Aiken. And so eventually they dug a cut through Aiken to alleviate that. And one of the things that was pretty remarkable about Dexter and Pascal's plan was the incorporation of open parkways between streets. At the time, these were intended actually for livestock, for grazing, for agricultural purposes. It wasn't really until the town became more of a leisure destination that these areas were beautified, and there was ornamental landscaping added and pathways and things like that. So at the time, they were much more functional and perfunctory and kind of just for cows and pigs and things. So kind of a neat trajectory for the parkways. This is a 1904 Sanborn map, so this is later on in the history of the town, and you can see that there are walking paths and things that have been added to the parkway. So this is just kind of illustrate the beautification of these areas that happened over time. This is a series of articles published between the 1830s and 1860s, really advertising Aiken as a health retreat. So prior to the Civil War, kind of between the 1830s, the arrival of the railroad and the Civil War, Aiken really emerged as a popular health destination, particularly for wealthy coastal elites. A lot of people came here because there were fewer mosquitoes, less chance of getting malaria, and they also believed that the air was drier and cleaner. So if you were suffering from tuberculosis, this would be a good place to come and help alleviate those symptoms. So this continued up on to the Civil War, and then after, it was temporarily halted during the war. There was a Civil War battle in Aiken, the Battle of Aiken in 1865, which was late in the course of the war. But it was, I believe, Union soldiers approached from the east along Park Avenue, and then they were pushed back by cavalry, Confederate cavalry. And I'm sure y'all know this, but 20 Union soldiers that died here were buried at the First Baptist Church, and their graves are still visible, which is a pretty remarkable landscape feature. Definitely something that we will document. But just to talk a little bit about the creation of Aiken County. So Aiken County is pretty remarkable in that it was created during Reconstruction by Black Republicans. So during Reconstruction, nearby towns like Ellington and Hamburg emerged as Black majority towns. And during Reconstruction, there were a lot of Black Republicans who became active in politics at the state level. And so several Black Republicans began campaigning for the creation of a new county, which became Aiken County. Unfortunately, these gains in political power were pretty brief. There was a lot of vigilante violence targeting Black communities and things like that. So by the next election, the 1876 election, a lot of the gains made by the Black community had been pushed back, and that's when Jim Crow essentially set in and the systematic disenfranchisement of Black communities. But there were some remarkable institutions in Aiken during the Reconstruction period that changed the course of the town's development. This is Martha Schofield. She was a Pennsylvania Quaker. She moved here to work for the Freedmen's Bureau during Reconstruction. They opened a school here in 1868. By 1870, she had purchased property and established the Schofield Normal and Industrial School. So they taught Black people of all ages, depending on what they needed. They offered professional and technical training as well as academic training. The Schofield School remained operational until 1970, at which point public schools began to integrate. So there was less enrollment, essentially. This is to show you the campus of the Schofield School. This is a Sanborn map, so you can see some of the buildings that were on campus. None of these buildings are still extant, but the Schofield Middle School is on that site, and the historic bell tower from the campus is at the entrance, which is pretty remarkable. So that's something we'll document as well. This is another important Reconstruction era figure in Aiken. This is Reverend W.R. Coles. He was a Presbyterian minister, and he moved here with his family in 1881 to open a school. I think initially he rented a house on Newberry Street and taught out of the house. He taught academic courses, and his wife taught music. But by 1882, they had purchased property on York Street, where they built a school building, which you see on the right, as well as a dormitory and a church. So here is an 1818 Sanborn map showing the location of the Emmanuel School. It changed names several times. It had a couple different lives, but it was a school for most of its existence. You can see that the church and the dormitory are no longer extant, but the Emmanuel Mission School still is. That is now the Center for, oh, I lost it. I just don't want to get the name wrong. The Center for African American History, Art, and Culture, which is a great local museum. We've been there and used some of their resources in trying to understand the history of Aiken better. What's really interesting about this map is that you can see on the opposite side of the block there are other Black cultural institutions, including the Wesleyan AME Church and the Cuthbert Memorial Hall, which was a social hall. So one thing we're hoping to do with census records and other historic materials are try to understand the history of the Black community in Aiken better, what areas of the city were populated by Black people, what sorts of jobs were Black people working, and how were they represented in the history of Aiken, essentially. So at the same time that all of that change during Reconstruction was happening, Aiken was also re-emerging as a tourist destination in the post-war era. And a lot of this is in part can be credited to Celestine Eustis and her niece Louise Eustis. So Celestine was a very wealthy, well-to-do, prominent New Orleans socialite, essentially. She became famous later in her life for publishing a series of Creole cookbooks, which is pretty interesting. But she came to Aiken during the summer months with her niece Louise, again, trying to get cleaner, healthier air. Louise's mother had actually died of tuberculosis when she was a child, so it was sort of a family concern. And so they would come here during the summer months, and Louise became extremely fond of Aiken, and she was also an avid horse rider. So later in her life, she's pictured on the left, she married a wealthy New York financier named Thomas Hitchcock. And so Thomas Hitchcock's an interesting figure. He studied at Oxford, where he was introduced to polo and steeplechase horse racing. These are things that I'm still learning about because I'm not super familiar with polo. But he was an avid polo player and a horse racer, and those things weren't, polo in particular was not popular in America yet, so he really pioneered those activities in the United States. But essentially, she convinced him to spend his winter months in Aiken rather than in New York City, so they would come here in winter. And he, with some other investors, purchased 8,000 acres, and that sort of paved the way for the first winter colony. And so in Aiken, he established polo tracks, polo fields, race tracks, a golf course, hunting clubs, all sorts of different leisure activities that were popular with him and his friends, and with Louise. So after the Hitchcocks came here, they began attracting other wealthy New Yorkers who came here to vacation essentially and spend the winter months here. Some really big names like Vanderbilts and Astors and things. So really some of the big names from the Gilded Age ended up in Aiken on account of the Hitchcocks. So this influx of tourists was accompanied by a construction boom. So around this time you see the construction of like big palatial estates as well as hotels and resorts. And that is some of the really grand architecture that you see around town. A lot of these are still extant, some have been lost. On the bottom right is the Highland Park Hotel, which I believe burned down twice and is no longer extant. On the top is Hotel Aiken. At this point it was called the Commercial Hotel, and I believe that's in the process of being restored right now. So that's just to kind of explain, these houses reflect a very specific developmental trend that was occurring in Aiken. And so one of the other things we've really pinpointed is how leisure activities changed the landscape of this town. So for example, polo fields and racetracks and things, they're still extant, they're still used, and they're a defining feature of the landscape in this area. Similarly, Hitchcock Woods. This is a picture from a newspaper. This is in front of the Wilcox Hotel. This is the Drag Hunt Club. I've tried to research a little bit about drag hunting, but what's really unique about these activities is that they revolved around horses. So you see a lot of outbuildings and architecture that is related to horses. So barns, stables, the tracks and things like that. So I'm gonna have to learn a good bit about horse-related architecture, but I'm excited to do so. Another really popular pastime was golf. The Palmetto Golf Club was established by Thomas Hitchcock in 1892. And it was designed primarily by Herbert Leeds. That was followed by the Aiken Golf Club, which was founded in 1912 as part of the Highland Hotel complex. And that course was expanded and partially designed by John Inglis. And they're both notable early landscape, golf course landscape designers. That's pretty incredible. So also a really important landscape feature in this town. So while the lives and pastimes of, the rich and famous that vacationed in Aiken has been really well documented, the lives of everyday people, specifically Black people in Aiken, has not been as well documented. So that is one of the things that we're gonna try and work on. So in this picture, on the bottom right, you can see some young kids that were hired as caddies. A lot of jobs in Aiken revolved around service industry positions, so construction, gardening, domestic workers, and things like that. But there were also a ton of black people in Aiken that were trainers and jockeys and things like that that were really well celebrated for their contributions. There were also a ton of important Black commercial clusters. One was in the downtown alley. There was one on Lawrence Street and York Street. And there were numerous Black-owned businesses in Aiken. On the top right there is a butcher shop in Lawrence Street. In the bottom left was a woman named Margaret Weston, who essentially operated a maternity ward out of a van, and she traveled through Aiken County and Edgefield County and did family planning and neonatal care, which is pretty incredible. One notable cluster of Black-owned businesses was the McGee Block, which was a pharmacy in the corner building that was owned by Dr. Charles C. Johnson. So the McGee Block was actually built by Albert and William McGee. They were Black contractors. They are pictured here on the left. And they built a number of important structures throughout Aiken, including parts of Aiken Hospital, the Aiken Prep Informatica School gyms, and then several of the serpentine brick walls along some of the big estates. What was really interesting about the Johnson Pharmacy is that it is listed in Green Books from 1949, along with a tourist home. So tourist homes were essentially private residences that were willing to host you as you traveled. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with what a Green Book is, but it was essentially a guidebook for places that were safe for Black travelers during the Jim Crow era and the Civil Rights era. So it was places you could count on going and being treated well. So there were two in Aiken, one of which was Dr. Johnson's drugstore, and the other was a private tourist home. The drugstore is still extant, which is awesome. I have tried to find the location of the tourist home, and I don't think it is still standing, but it's still a neat piece of history. Another event that dramatically changed Aiken's history was the Savannah River site. So that was opened in the 1950s, and the government essentially seized a bunch of land through eminent domain to build a plant that didn't build bombs but built materials for bombs, I think. And, did a lot of scientific research. We actually went to the museum the last time we were here, and it's really cool. If anyone hasn't checked it out, I recommend it. But part of the eminent domain process meant that lots of people were displaced. The town of Elleton was displaced, and 6,000 residents were displaced in total, most of whom were Black farmers living in rural areas. But another externality of this was that there was a major population boom in Aiken. So when we think of the built environment, around the 1950s, we're looking at American small houses and ranch houses, increases in suburban development, increases in mid-century infill. How do those homes and things relate to the creation of the Savannah River site? So that's sort of where we're at right now in understanding the history of Aiken. I know there's a lot more to it than that. And, I didn't want to take up everyone's entire night. But how can you help? If you're interested in helping, please give us your input. Feedback from the local community is always great. Y'all know your town better than I ever will. And so it's important to know what is important to you. Because I can't come in as an outsider and tell you what matters to Aiken. It's up to Aiken what matters. Let us know if there are resources that you think need documentation, need research, things like that. Any information about your own property or your neighbor's property, things that is always helpful. And then research materials are always great. And, just spread the word. And we're happy to listen and happy to stay in touch. And, yeah, we're here for questions, concerns, comments, anything. So.
All right. Well, thank you for that presentation. That was well thought out. I guess my next question is, do we want to talk about the schedules and dates, or do you think we should do some public questions at this point? What do y'all want to do? You want to talk, Linda? Yep. All right. So let's have a public comment for a few minutes.
Can I mention?
Yeah.
Rebecca, excuse me. There's going to be another opportunity for this. Can you address that?
Yes, absolutely. So on the 26th at City Council's work session, the Anders and WLA will be back again. to give this presentation. So you'll have another chance to think and to speak about what you've heard tonight.
And any feedback that I get tonight I will try to work it into the next presentation as best as possible. So
Okay.
I will stand to the side and
So, Mr. Chairman, I have one quick question.
Yeah.
So, the last survey was only a windshield survey, and they missed
right.
some things.
I'm aware.
So the question is, how are you going to make sure that we get everything?
Well, so we take a picture of every single structure in the survey area. So I don't think that we will miss anything. We also use GIS data and parcel data provided by the city. And we visually represent which parcels we have surveyed and not surveyed. So if there are any gaps in our survey, we'll know ahead of time and we'll make return trips to fill any gaps we have.
And personally, I'd love to get a copy of the picture of Palmetto Golf Club.
Okay.
Because it has a picture of our house before it burnt down.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's really cool.
One thing that I've noticed is that there aren't a ton of historic pictures of Aiken online. I don't know if they're in private holdings or through archives. I think I used a lot of those pictures without permissions. But I will be happy to send you that picture.
Thank you.
I'd like to go back to my original
Yeah, of
survey
course.
area question too, because to me, we're missing half of the old Aiken grid.
Do you want me to go back to the survey map?
And if we're documenting there's just a lot of history on that other side of the grid and what we call the north side up to Hampton, the original grid where the parkways are.
Okay.
I just think there's a lot of resources in that area that we're not going to survey. I don't know if that would be a different,
Yeah, that would probably be a separate. So a lot of the time surveys occur in phases. In Monroe, we surveyed that in 4 phases. So it just depends. So we won't survey that area, but I will write about the town entirely throughout the developmental history. I'll try to focus on the survey area, but I will talk about the north side in the developmental history for sure. I don't know if that fully addresses your concerns, though.
it's just,
Just follow up to what Katie had. In future, if you document that so that we can, if we need to, come back and do surveys, we've already identified and strategically pointed out those areas, correct?
Yeah, so that might be a recommendation we make as a final part of the project would be we see a potential historic significance in these areas and through our developmental history and our research, and we believe that these areas need more intensive survey. So those are recommendations we can make, but they're not in the scope of our survey as it exists right now. Any other questions, or should I
Yeah, any other questions for the board?
can get out of the way?
Okay. Well, you could still ask one later. All right, so let's see if there's any public questions that we can take. Please give us your name and address.
Linda Johnson, 515 Parkside Drive. To answer Katie's question, and Rebecca, you can clarify this, the amount of money that was given for the grant limited the scope of this. And the idea is that this will be the first of maybe one or of several surveys. Is that right, Rebecca?
Yeah, so this is our phase 1. If they suggest other areas that may need further surveying, or if this board of the community expresses interest, then we can explore those avenues as well, and I can try applying for other grants. But our primary goal for this survey was to address the issue of not having designations for every single property within our existing overlays. That's caused procedural problems that we wanted to fix.
So you're right. We look forward to the next phase. A question that I have, and I want to see if I can clarify with our
Anders.
team here.
Yeah.
So this goes back to needing to know that we've covered everything. It was my understanding that we would list every property. They'd only evaluate properties that are more than 40 years old, because if we don't, have the address or parcel number or whatever, we're going to be in the same boat as we are now, where we have a property and it's not on a list somewhere. So how are you doing that?
I've spoken to Rebecca. We are going to try and create a list of every building.
I'm so sorry, Andrews, would you mind speaking to the microphone so it's on record?
I've spoken to Rebecca about this issue, and so a part of what we're gonna use the GIS information to do is create a list of everything that's 40 years or older, and then also create a list of everything that's 40 years or newer.
And then the final thing, I know that between me and the museum, we have a whole lot of photos on our computers, so we'll help with that and with some of the history stuff.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Please come forward and state your name.
My name is Terry Young. I live at 1211 South Boundary. I'm well, but I take medicine that does this to me, so I brought water. My question is we're talking about not only the historic district, but the overlay district. So would the people in the overlay district potentially have to go through the same process as, say, I wanted to put up a new fence, as people in the historic district when this survey is completed?
Yep.
So this survey would not be making this another historic district. Really, we're just gathering information. So while they might provide recommendations on the historical significance, those designations will not be reviewed or used in necessarily the same way as in the historic district as we do in our historic reviews.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
you know,
Well,
Go
I
ahead.
can't,
the Old Aiken overlay will still be reviewed as it has always been reviewed.
okay, I was just, my question, I guess, would be more to Mr. Lott, who said that this would be taken further when the
Yep.
survey is finished.
Right.
What is your intent?
So one, and I appreciate the question. In my vision, which may not line up with everybody's, is that they're a data provider.
Yes.
Okay, they're providing us data, and that we, as a city board or interested citizens, might take that data and do something else with it. I do not think the intent is to immediately, to Rebecca's point, set up a new overlay district, because we've got, the downtown overlay, the historic overlay. This is not about changing these lines at this point. Now, will somebody come up with an idea to do that later? Maybe. That's just not on our agenda right now. It's really about identifying what we already have in our districts, and then trying to get a good catalog of what we already have in the current historic district 1, historic district 2, et cetera. And because of the way our ordinance was written, we've had several problems where the design review board has not been able to make a ruling because there was not a city council designation on a property. As a matter of fact, one of my favorite stories is a house over on Park Avenue and in Stobbs Lane that burned and was rebuilt in the late 1990s. It still looks like the original house, but it's a brand new house. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at our old survey, it says a contributing property. Well, it's not a contributing property. It was completely rebuilt in the 1990s. So, we really need a non-contributing status on that property, but the last survey said it was contributing, and that's what city council voted on, that was contributing. And so now we have to deal with this new house like it's a contributing property. So I'm hoping to clarify some of those things. We had the Scientology church came up. Yes. And what do we do with that? Well, everybody thought it was built in the 1970s, and it was. Is it a historical home? I don't think so. But what was the designation from city council on that? And thank God somebody found that it had been designated non-contributing, or we were going to go through, however many months of trying to obtain a designation so we could take action, because our ordinance limits us from taking action even when everybody knows what they want to do because of these missing designations. So one of my goals is to kind of clarify where we are, not so much about going out and trying to grab a bunch more properties and making them contributing or landmarks is really just to help us manage better, you know.
Okay, how would one find out what the designation was on their property?
Rebecca, is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there should be a map online where you can look up our survey cards, or you can call the planning department and ask for me, and I'd be happy to tell you that information.
Okay, all right, thank you.
No, those good questions.
Yes, anyway, it was a very interesting presentation.
Thank you.
Rebecca,
Anybody?
does that property info on the website, you can put in your address and it pulls up the cards on it? Does it include contributing or non-contributing?
Yes, it should. It should.
Okay. Who else? All right. Well, I really appreciate everybody coming tonight. So even though you're not asking questions, I appreciate you coming out. So should we move to talk about dates and when we things, you want to talk about our schedule?
So just to talk about the project schedule, so today, presenting to the Design Review Board. On the 26th, I'll be presenting to City Council. And then the draft of the developmental history is due to the city and state in March. So I'll be busy working on that in February. And then the survey report and the survey data, so the raw data, is due in June. And then the final report is due at the end of September.
And I would think that between March and June and September, that there's will be a lot of feedback and collaboration.
Yes, we try to work as closely as we can with the city and with Brad Sauls at the state. So I really want it to be a back and forth process. I really want to know what the city's concerns are, and I've heard that the designation status is really important. Because we really want to address y'all's needs and concerns. So it will hopefully be a conversation back and forth to really tailor the report to the community's needs.
Just a question I've had to ask me several times. When you're completed and you've presented it, what kind of document will we get?
So it will be, it's a couple different things.
Okay.
So there will be a raw database, a Microsoft Access database, which can be held privately by the city and is editable, so you can update it after the fact. The state and city will also get GIS data. At the state level, they essentially take all of that data and put it into their own GIS database. And then we will also have a printed and bound report that we will send to you, as well as digital copies of everything.
Okay. And Rebecca, will the report be online for people to be able to see later?
So we should have the report online in our agendas whenever we're reviewing it, and then absolutely, it should be public record.
Okay. Thank you. Good.
Yep, of course.
And at some point, we'll make that available to the general public before we take any actions and that sort of stuff.
Yes, so before y'all take actions, I'll probably put it in a staff memo, make it available online, and then everyone can review it and see what their property has been suggested as.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, I'd like to suggest that we invite the Planning Commission to that City Council work session, just so they have a better idea of what we do as a board. I mean, we kind of know what they do as a board, but I really don't know that they know that what we do as a board. And I think this is the whole thing. I mean, this is the crux of what we do. And it would be a good thing for them to participate in.
Mm-hmm. So the city council meeting, Rebecca, is the DRB participating in that, or is that just a presentation like we got tonight for city council?
It'll be a presentation like this, so y'all are welcome to attend, and if y'all want to speak during the public sections, then y'all are welcome to do that, I think.
Okay. Yes, sir. I just had 2 questions. Could you come up and tell us your name and address?
My name's Ben Timmerman. I actually live at 119 Northwood Drive. I'm just curious, what do the green properties mean on the map?
So,
and when you mentioned just now about possibly taking action, what does that mean in reference to my property? My property's commercial. I have very good tenants. And, you know, it's always scary when you guys start putting signs up about things. So I'm just a little curious about that because I'm in that green area where the green properties are.
Right, and are you talking about the Family Dollar store or a different property?
Oh, no, I have properties behind the
Yeah.
Family Dollar store and then on other parts of Richmond.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can answer that, please. What you're seeing is our existing overlays. So the blue is our historic overlays, and the green is the Old Aiken. So it sounds like you're located within our Old Aiken overlay.
That's right.
Okay, so as a commercial owner, what does that mean for me? 'Cause when I think historic society, like I have friends that have homes in the historic society.
Right.
Yeah,
I have
absolutely.
no idea what my commercial property would have to do with the, and we got signs now in front of our, we have one particular vacant lot that's saying something about the historical society. You have to forgive me, I work in Edgefield County, so I drive by there and I see the sign, I said, well, I need to go see what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So within our Old Aiken overlay, it's similar in the fact that whenever you make changes to the exterior of the structure, in most cases, you do need to have approval through a certificate of appropriateness by this board. So, you know, when they're talking about taking action after we do this survey, they're talking about adopting those suggested designation statuses. Within our Old Aiken overlay, those statuses are not required for a review. So the way that we review your property will not be changing after the board adopts those designation statuses. Basically, this will just give more information on the history of your property.
Oh, wow, okay. Well, it's been in my family since the 50s, so it's been a day or two. So what did you mean about if we decide to take action with something? If you decided y'all wanted to make a change with my property or
So
something?
if we wanted to change the designation of a property,
Like mine's, I think was, at one time, it was supposed to be light industrial.
right,
It's
and
been
it probably still is zoned that.
It is,
Yeah,
it's been
yeah.
changed a couple
Right.
times.
Yeah, and so
It's just very concerning.
if you think about the properties right around yours, okay, across the street, catty corner, does a new gas station.
Correct.
Okay. They brought in their design for the building and the parking lot and all and said to this committee, is this suitable to build in a downtown business location? Not, is this suitable to build in a historic location? Because that's not the historic district.
Gotcha.
It's a downtown business location. But this committee and board has been given purview over downtown businesses, which are those green blocks that you're asking about.
So-
And there's a different standard for them than it would if you're in a historic district. So there's two different guide standards. And theirs are, is this appropriate for the downtown area? And so we voted to approve the gas station design, and they built the gas station. And so also, if you think directly across the street, there's some proposals going on with putting some townhouses or something in there.
yeah, I've heard
Right.
about that.
And so they also will bring their designs to this committee to say, is this appropriate
Well,
for a
when the
downtown
Family
location?
Dollar was built, they had to do that.
That's right.
I'm very familiar with
That's
that.
right, that's right.
So-
And so if, there's a sign ordinance, so if you want to change a sign on the Family Dollar store to, say, red and white stores or whatever, then you come through, and we normally do an administrative approval for that kind of
Okay, so
stuff.
basically what it comes down to, anything you want to do on your property.
Outside.
If it's in the city
To
limits,
change the looks of the
you
city,
have to go through the board to get
that's
it
right,
cleared.
yeah.
Okay.
But it's a different set of standards than if it was a historical home.
Oh, I know what historical society.
Right, right, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Anybody else? Okay. Any comments about the schedule? All right. Well, I would like to encourage the board and everyone here tonight to, as this data becomes available, to help us look over it, because I think that the more eyes we have on it, the more we're likely to not have a mistake. And like I said, I do not like for a government board like this board, is a City of Aiken board, to hold up anybody who's a property owner from being able to do whatever they need to do on their property, as long as it's in keeping within the neighborhood. And so we like to move those things quickly, and when we find somebody where, okay, well, now it's going to take 6 months or something to do that, then that's just, I don't like that. So we want to try to smooth out the process by using the subcontractors to to help us make informed decisions in order to make life easier for all of us and to maintain the character of the historic district and the character of the downtown overlay district and how all those things apply separately. So, what are we forgetting?
I think that's all we had, if there are no more questions.
Yeah, Ben, come back up.
In the part that you said, why did the two signs that you guys are, why did they say historic district on them? I got
think-
pictures of them. It says historic district. And I appreciate what you just told me, and that's really nice.
So may I see what you're referring to?
It may use, they put the wrong sign up.
We're curious, that's all. I get everything you said.
Yeah.
No worries. Could it possibly be, it said historic resource survey update?
Yeah,
Okay.
now that could have been, because we did put signs up saying that the subcontractors are gonna be doing a historic survey, and that might be about their investigation work. Well, yeah, let's not hold up the meeting for this. Any other comments from the board, before we adjourn? Anything y'all wanted to cover? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight on Thursday night, and look forward to seeing you at our next meeting. Meeting's adjourned.